Welcome all. Good evening from the Douglas County Democrats. I'm Pat Willer, and I am pleased to welcome you to the most recent of our series of forums with our Douglas County Democratic candidates for office. Tonight we have the candidates for District 10 for the Kansas House of Representatives. This is a district that's currently represented by Eileen Horn. Many of you may know her, and she is not running for re-election. So we have 3 great candidates that we are going to get to discuss the affairs of the state with tonight. District 10, and if you're not in District 10, that's okay, keep watching. It'll be a good evening and a good discussion. But if you are or aren't sure if you are, basically we're talking about Southwest Lawrence over to Baldwin, and then east to Eudora, parts of Eudora, sort of south of K10, I think. So generally speaking, that area, if you have any questions about whether you are in District 10, there's a great election hub website that is on the Douglas County Elections Office website. And it's great for figuring out all the districts that you're in and so on and so forth. So it's a great new tool that the county elections office have done. Or email me and I'll figure it out, okay? At any rate, we will begin the forum shortly. I wanted to remind folks about a few of our upcoming events. We have, we've been Zooming every Tuesday, trying to get in all of the contested candidate races before early voting starts. And we're going to accomplish that goal, thanks to the help of everyone, and thanks to people marking off Tuesday for Zooming with the Democrats. But in addition, we've added one for Thursday night of this week. Michelle de la Isla, Mayor of Topeka and candidate for U.S. Congress, will be with us for a campaign update, and we'll also be taking questions ahead of time in the reservations. She'll be talking about healthcare issues and other things where your questions take us. Then we have next Tuesday, July 14th, we have candidates for the Douglas County Treasurer, again, a newly opened seat, 2 Democratic candidates, and 2 candidates for the Register of Deeds. Again, no incumbent in either one. These races are all that we have been doing the forums on, are all hugely important. In almost all of the cases, there will be no Republican opposition on the ballot in November. So it's your job now to figure out, to listen to the candidates, to figure out who best represents what your beliefs are and your goals are, and to vote, 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 because this is really a uniquely critical primary election. So if anybody ever thought a primary election was boring, it is not this one. And you can begin voting. Early voting begins July 15th, so the day after our last forum. There's still time to sign up for an advance ballot, which will allow you to vote by mail. You can do this by going to ksvotes.org. Again, if you have other questions, you can email us through the Douglas County Democrats website. We're happy to help in that regard as well. We have many, many volunteers currently calling people, letting them know that they need to go ahead, that they can apply for an advance ballot, that they can do mail-in voting. It is so critically important that we get this down. The results so far have been fantastic, that very good turnout in terms of switching us over to vote by mail, but they are slowing down a little bit. And so we need to make sure anybody and everybody who wants to vote has the flexibility. I think we ought to find out about our candidates tonight that you will be voting for, the District 10 candidates. We have with us also the moderator for this evening, and I am very pleased that I get to introduce the moderator, and I will do so. The candidates will, in a sense, introduce themselves. Carol, our moderator, will give them a brief go ahead. We asked each candidate to present him or herself as they wish, so they can be the best introducers of themselves. After a 3-minute opening statement, there will be 2-minute questions, and there will be 1-minute questions, and then there will be closing remarks. So we hope we're all going to have fun, and we're also all going to learn a lot, and we're also going to be ready to vote before August 4th. Okay. So I am going to turn to the moderator, Carol Cadue-Blackwood. Carol is a product of Lawrence education. She attended Lawrence Public Schools, K through 12. She has an associate's degree from Haskell Indian Nations University, a bachelor's degree in politics, and a master's degree in clinical social work from University of Kansas. She is currently a member of the Lawrence School Board and a delegate to this year's Democratic National Convention. She and her husband are high school sweethearts and have 3 wonderful children. With that, I am pleased to turn over the mic and the evening to Carol Cadue-Blackwood. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Pat. And I would like to thank the candidates, the attendees, and to those who submitted really great questions to the Douglas County. And I would like to thank the Douglas County Democrats. As Pat said, I grew up in Lawrence, and I come from a long line of Democrats and grew up in politics. I didn't choose politics. Politics chose me, and I appreciate this great opportunity tonight. And as Pat said, each candidate will have 3 minutes for an opening statement, 2 minutes for the first round of questions, 1 minute for the second round, and 2 minutes for the closing. And with that being said, I would like to just kind of change it up because, you know, Lawrence, we do things differently. I would like to go in reverse order, starting with AJ Stevens and Brandon Holland and Christina Haswood, if that's okay with everyone. Okay, here's the first question. 2020 has been a tumultuous year. Citizens and public officials struggle with the COVID-19 public health emergency, and we are now having an intense and long overdue examination of social injustice brought on by recent homicides of Black citizens at the hands of police. These events will continue to make demands on public officials. What have you learned from these events, and how will they influence your priorities?
Yes. Thank you. Now, do we start with an intro, or do we go right into the questions?
I'm so sorry. I jumped the gun. Go ahead and do. I'm chewing at the bit here. I'm so sorry. Yes, go ahead and do your introductions. I'm sorry, AJ.
I'm chewing at the bit to answer that question. So, how y'all doing? My name's AJ Stevens. I'm running for state representative. My wife, Carrie, my son, Cade, and I live in Baldwin City, where I recently completed my term as a city council president. While serving in Baldwin City, I gained valuable experience that helped me prepare to represent you in Topeka, and I think it's valuable experience. While I served as president of city council, I presented a non-discrimination ordinance that added protection for real and perceived race, sexual orientation, gender identity, age, marital status, familial status, veteran status for all of our residents. The first time I made this motion, it failed to even get a second. So I made the motion and just dead silence. 4 weeks later, with a lot of diplomacy and discussion and education, it passed 5-0 and became law. And it's probably one of the most rewarding moments of my political career. I'm very proud of it. Prior to that, our non-discrimination, I wouldn't even call it a non-discrimination ordinance, but our policy had been written in 1983, and we were still a dry city at that time. I also served on the utility committee that brought a budget neutral solar farm to Baldwin City with a public-private partnership that we had set up. The addition of that solar farm brought our renewable energy use up to 43%, which made us one of the greenest communities in Kansas. And we're very proud of that. And to be honest, we probably should put a billboard up about it, and we don't. I think it's just kind of business as usual for us. Another thing that I did was I served as the finance committee chairman, which I have 11 years of public sector experience with budgetary responsibility, and I can tell you government funding and budgets are tricky. And we managed the 2 years that I was on the committee, we managed to present a balanced budget, and we actually gave our citizens a small tax savings while funding 6 quality life projects, and not having a single increase in utilities, because Baldwin, we actually own our utilities with the water, sewer, and electric. And I fought that over and over again my entire time, because I was worried about the families that were struggling to choose between whether they feed their children or pay their electric bills, and I was worried about our seniors. I grew up in a family like that. very often as a child, my only meal was lunch at school, and we were fortunate that our dining hall staff made cookies in the morning, and we ate those for breakfast. And so for me, that's kind of driven me my whole life, and my desire to serve, and that's why I decided to run now. I think now more than ever we need experience in leadership, and it's important because while we have really great medical professionals working on a solution or some kind of way to mitigate COVID-19 and try to bring us back to as close to normal as possible. I mean, I think none of us really think that we're going to be normal, but I think what scares me really bad is that we're already projected to be a $700 million loss for next year. And that's not even counting the fact that in 23 weeks, we're going to deplete our unemployment fund. So I'm horrified about the lack of Medicaid expansion. I'm horrified about the fact that our schools are still severely underfunded. And before any of that, we have to find a way to address the budget without going back to the brown back cuts and everything. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. And with that, we'll pass the microphone to Mr. Brandon Holland. You have 3 minutes for your opening statement.
Hi, I'm Brandon Holland, and I first off wanted to thank the Douglas County Democrats for putting this event on. I think it's really important that voters get to hear from their candidates, hear their positions and platforms so that they get to make an educated decision on Election Day. Thank you, Pat, and thank you, Noreen and Carol, for throwing this together and running it. You guys are awesome. And I also like to thank everybody in attendance. The world needs more people like you who are actually interested and engaged in what's going on with our government. So I was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I moved to the 10th district when I was 4 years old. I started kindergarten at Prairie Park the first year that it was open. And after that, I went to South Junior High, the old one, before it was rebuilt and before it became Billy Mills Middle School. It was during junior high where I was first introduced to politics. As some of you may know, my dad is State Senator Tom Holland. So I was introduced at an early age, beginning with my dad's first run for office. I have campaigned for Democrats in every single election cycle. Since I was 14 years old, I have worked to get Democrats elected to office. I graduated Lawrence High in 2007, and then I enrolled at KU to study political science and Arabic in the Middle East. And it was during this time where I faced some real personal struggles. In high school and college, I played rugby with the Kansas Jayhawk Rugby Football Club here in Lawrence, and I suffered numerous concussions, and this gave me brain damage. And as a result, I had some pretty serious mental health issues for years. I eventually found a doctor who specialized in head trauma, and over the span of working really hard with him, 5 years, I was able to regain most of my cognitive abilities and my mental health. As a wage earner, I could not have afforded this treatment on my own because insurance wouldn't cover it. It was tens of thousands of dollars. Fortunately for me, my family could afford to get me the treatment that I needed, but for far too many Kansans, we know that to not be the case. And I think that is cruel and inhumane. I received the treatment that I needed, and I got my life back. I believe every Kansan deserves that same chance. Every Kansan deserves the treatment that they need to get their lives back. As a wage earner, I know firsthand how devastating a physical injury or mental health issue can be to a person's livelihood when you are relying on every single hour of work, to get the income that you need. And so that is why I'm running. Thanks.
And with that, we will pass the microphone over to Ms. Haswood, and please give us your opening statement. You have 3 minutes.
My name is Christina Haswood, and I'm a public health professional and a lifelong resident of District 10. I attended Prairie Park Elementary, Billy Mills Middle School, and Lawrence High School before earning my associates from Haskell Indian Nations University After graduating with my Bachelor's of Science from Arizona State University, I moved on to the University of Kansas Medical Center, where I earned a Master's in Public Health and Management in May. I currently work as a research assistant for the National Council of Urban Indian Health and the Center for American Indian Community Health, investigating issues such as tribal youth nicotine addiction and COVID-19's effect on Native populations. In these unprecedented times, we need strong public health leadership in the state capitol now more than ever. Not only would I listen to public health expertise in Topeka, I would provide it. Not only I would be a strong advocate for implementing a scientific and adequate response to COVID-19 to ensure we save as many lives as we can. For this reason, expanding Medicaid is also a top priority because there is no reason to keep 150,000 vulnerable Kansans from reaching access to affordable health insurance in the middle of a pandemic, especially since they're already paid for it. Speaking of vulnerable populations, I want to address the racial tensions that we are seeing right here in Lawrence and across the country. First of all, I want to say that Black lives matter. Second of all, in my role as a researcher, I have seen firsthand the effects that systematic racism have on the health and vulnerable populations, and in the Black community in particular. We must actively defend, support, and uplift our Black brothers and sisters, and if we ever hope to live in a more just and equal society. One of the keys to achieving this better society is quality education. I'm a proud product of the Lawrence Public Schools, and I understand the importance of keeping our public schools funded to provide a quality education in an equitable manner and to ensure our students graduate with the skills to successfully in their post-education journeys. That's why I'm proud to be the only candidate in this primary who has the endorsement of KNEA and teachers with representation right here in Douglas County. Speaking of endorsements, I'm happy to have the support of our current 10th District Representative, Eileen Horn, an inspirational leader who I know we are all very sad to lose as our voice in Topeka, but I'm proud that she has placed her trust in me to replace her, as have Representative Book Heiberger, Lawrence Mayor Jennifer Ananda, and several other members of the Kansas House and Lawrence and Baldwin school boards. In politics, there's often a choice between youth and experience. I believe my candidacy offers a rare opportunity to elect both at once. Not only would I be the youngest current member of the Kansas legislature, I would also be just the third Native American member in its history. I believe my voice is the best to fight for the underrepresented populations of Douglas County, including our youth and people of color. I am qualified and ready to be your next progressive leader in the State House. I look forward to the discussion ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haswood. The next round will include a series of 2-minute questions. And this time it is for real. So we will begin with Mr. A.J. Stevens. 2020 has been a tumultuous year. Citizens and public officials struggle with the COVID-19 public health emergency, and we're now having a long overdue examination of social injustice brought on by recent homicides of Black citizens at the hands of police. These events will continue to make demands on public officials. What have you learned from these events, and how will they influence your priorities? Mr. Stevens?
Yes, and I want to apologize. My video is not working, but are you able to hear me? Okay. So what I've learned, to be honest, it's brought to light something that I've already been aware of. My platform has always included justice reform. And let's be honest, it's Black men are being executed right there on the street. I mean, Black lives do matter. And nowhere in the Constitution does it say that anybody, regardless of their employment with our government, can be the judge, the jury, and the executioner. We've all seen it. All the rest of it is noise. We need to keep in mind that people are being executed, and that is completely unacceptable. And we need to keep our eye on that. And it starts with justice reform. It starts with increased funding for mental health, increased treatment for substance abuse. And to be honest, we need to get rid of cash bond. We need to get rid of the drug charges that are going on and treat them for what they are, and that's addiction. I personally want to push to legalize marijuana and to treat other drug offenses as what they are, which is substance abuse. And to be honest, I want to go to a restorative justice model, similar to Castle Rock, Colorado, where nonviolent crimes are actually handled in a different way rather than imprisonment. I'm not sure where I am on time, but at the end of the day, it's been a problem throughout our society since the beginning, and trying to deny it is a mistake. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. And please proceed, Mr. Holland. Would you like for me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. 2020 has been a tumultuous year. Citizens and public officials struggle with the COVID-19 public health emergency, and we are now having an intense and long overdue examination of social injustice brought on by recent homicides of Black citizens at the hands of police. These events will continue to make demands on public officials. What have you learned from these events, and how will they influence your priorities?
What I've learned from these events is how widespread and deep-rooted racism is in most of our institutions in this country, and it rears its head in many shapes and forms. But what it comes down to is that there is a serious inequity and disparity in health and well-being of the different people in this country. Black people and other minority groups are not given the same advantages and privileges that me as a white male, as I enjoy. I will never be able to fully understand and comprehend what it is like to be a Black man walking down the street, fearing any sort of interaction with the police whatsoever. I will never be able to fully empathize with that. But what I can do is listen to the voices of those who have, and put my voice behind theirs. Again, as a privileged white male, it's not my voice that needs to be heard right now, and they're not. My ideas aren't the ones to be heeded. White people have been in charge forever. They have been dominant, and it really hasn't led to racial equality in any way, shape, or form. So I think the best thing that public officials can do, and I learned this firsthand when I was marching downtown Mass Street following George Floyd's death, that there's no one person who can fix everything. We have to add our voices together. And I plan on giving that support and putting my voice behind the voices of people who do know what it's like and who have the best ideas and who I trust to solve these issues and to work with.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. And Christina, would you like for me to repeat the question? Ms. Haswood?
Yeah, I think I'm ready to answer.
Okay, proceed, please.
COVID-19 exposed us to a system that we have in place that we thought we could trust. It broke. Our healthcare workers were stressed. Our frontline workers were risking their lives, not only for themselves, but to bring it home to their families and to their communities. It exposed the disparities of social economics and social determinants of health. These are terms in public health that we use, where you pretty much your zip code determines your quality of life. We first saw the rich and the celebrities getting tested first. And then the poor and the people working class, the hardworking Kansans had to go to work every day to expose themselves to that. With the Black Lives Matter movement, it also amplified the systematic centuries of racism happening in this country today. Black Lives Matter movement and indigenous movements go back in history, and we saw this locally in Kansas and Lawrence, where the Black Lives Matter would often team up with indigenous protectors, as well as protesting Spirit Halloween store. And we have this long history of teaming up together, fighting for racial injustice and equalities. To address the criminal justice system of Black Lives Matter movement that sparked and ignite this, I would want to eliminate qualified immunity, where we had the assumption of good faith that allows bad cops to become repeated offenders, as well as requiring malpractice insurance for the police, where violent cops will be priced out of a job, and expand whistleblower protection, we need to have these policies in place to allow a safe environment for people to go ahead and report bad scenes that they saw. And then we also need to take that step further, not only look at the criminal justice system, but look at the healthcare and the education and the job unemployment, the discrimination that Black Americans face today. This is just a little spark of it, and we need to fight for the justices of murderers to bring to justice of these horrendous events. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haswood. And with that, we will go to our second question. Mr. Stevens, since 2015, 20 states have made mental health first aid as a priority by enacting policies that allocate funding for trainings, require certification standards for public sector employees, and establish statewide mental health training programs and mandates. Youth mental health first aid is an important training offered in several Kansas schools to ensure student safety. It is going to become of even greater value as we begin school after the pandemic to ensure support is available when students experience mental health issues or a crisis. How can you, as an elected official, support or advocate to get this required in the state of Kansas?
Yes. I think the primary thing is to make sure that politics as usual doesn't happen. I mean, you look at our state house, too often we get bills that just buried in committee and political games are played. And at the end of the day, we need to stand up for it and make sure that we do what it takes diplomatically and to work across the island with our colleagues to get that out of committee and get an open discussion on it. I feel like the data is undeniable that needs to be funded, and we need to make sure that we're providing those services and that they're well regulated, and the fact that we know that the proper education is in place for the people that are serving that purpose. And I think there's going to be a greater need than ever as you see there's a strong movement to reallocate portions of our criminal justice funds to similar projects. And so I think the need is going to be even greater as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. And Mr. Holland, I will ask you the same question. Would you like for me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Since 2015, 20 states have made mental health first aid a priority by enacting policies that allocate funding for trainings, require certification standards for public sector employees, and establish statewide mental health training programs and mandates. Youth mental health first aid is an important training offered in several Kansas schools to ensure student safety. It is going to become of even greater value as we begin school after the pandemic to ensure support is available when students experience mental health issues or a crisis. How can you, as an elected official, support or advocate to get this required in the state of Kansas?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to do is ensure that we are constitutionally funding our schools. For far too long, for over a decade, Kansas was embroiled in litigation. Our government was determined to spend as much money as possible, to spend as little as money as possible on our schools. I think that mental health first aid is incredibly important in schools. I know personally growing up, when my fellow students would have, mental crisis, teachers who had not been trained in that field were forced to deal with it, and it seldom worked out smoothly or well. So I think the number one thing is to make sure that we find the funding to train and certify and pay well mental health professionals in our schools, especially now in this time. Mental health issues have been rising in the state. The suicide rate for 15 to 24-year-olds is now the second leading cause of death, I believe. Suicide in general is rising in Kansas. Now with COVID-19 on top of that, we're going to see an even greater increase in mental health needs from children stuck at home with abusive families, or just depression from isolation and being away from your friends for so long, which can be so important to children growing up and to their mental health. So we have to make sure that schools are funded constitutionally, not just adequately, but constitutionally. so that we can, hire all the professionals we need, not just teachers, but everyone, like mental health professionals for our children.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. And Christina, would you like for me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. Since 2015, 20 states have made mental health first aid a priority by enacting policies that allocate funding for trainings, require certification standards for public sector employees, and establish statewide mental health training programs and mandates. Youth mental health first aid is an important training offered in several Kansas schools to ensure student safety. It is going to become of even greater value as we begin school after the pandemic to ensure support is available when students experience mental health issues or crisis. How can you as an elected official support or advocate to get this required in the state of Kansas?
As a public health professional, I studied suicide. I specialize in suicide and adolescent health, mainly in the American Indian, Native American population, where we are disproportionately affected by suicide, adolescent age around the age of, I would say, about 11 to about 20, 22 years old. Unfortunately, here in the district, we have had some suicides at the university level. And I think just that at the collegiate level, the communication and the plans need to be enact faster. There needs to be more of a quicker response. I believe that we should implement more risk suicide programs to identify and create more red flags to identify those who are most at risk, who are showing signs and symptoms of suicide ideation, suicidal behavior, even bring it down to more poor mental health days, and behavioral positive change. I believe that this system of treating suicide and mental health as a first aid, this correlation of if someone's having a bad day, it's similar to someone who has a paper cut. I'm not saying that that's exactly the correct equation, but I believe we should break that stigma of asking for help and break that stigma of when we see somebody who needs help, who's having a bad mental health day, what do? We're not trained. It's not societally accepted to know the steps and precautions. We know how to stop, drop, and roll from a fire, right? We were taught that in the elementary days when we were like 6 or 7. I believe we should treat suicide and mental health to normalize that. We all go through bad days, and this is how we can fix it. This is how you stress manage and how you deal with this stress and anxiety in a more healthy manner. We should do this at age appropriate educational levels, put it in the school systems so we can practice this, and the children can have to not only build these habits, but take it out into the adult world when they're adults. And then I believe that would be a protective factor. In public health, we look at risk factors and protective factors, and we need to focus on the protective factors to enrich and strengthen ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haswood. And with that, we will proceed to our third question. Mr. Stevens, how will you collaborate with Republicans to make a better Kansas for everyone? There, I think you're mute. There you go.
Yeah. You know what? Collaboration is what it's all about throughout life. I'm 50 years old now, and I remember when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, my music was the best music there was, and everybody else just need to listen to it as loud as possible. And as I've grown older, through my successes and failures, I've learned that at the end of the day, the truly great things that happen in life are when you take a moment to listen to what other people have to say and show respect in sharing what you have and sorting through wants and needs and trying to take as much emotion out as possible. And I feel like when I watch our state senate and our state legislature right now, there's just too much emotion involved. Not that they're not emotional subjects, but there's just some complete silliness going on right now. 24-hour sessions, 100-page documents being shoved through without anybody reading them. I think more than anything, we need to find a way to see each other as human beings. I would do that by going in and making sure that I had lunch with people and sat down and talked with them and listen to what their needs were, because if I'll listen to them, they'll listen to me. And then maybe we can find somewhere in the middle that's going to work. Because right now that's not happening, and it's tough with us being Democrats, being the minority. I think it's important that we stand firm on what our beliefs are, but acknowledge that their views are valid as well with them and their constituents. And small victories make for great opportunity in my book. So I think conversation and dialogue and being human is how I would do it, and that's how I've done it my whole life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. And with that, we will pass the microphone to Mr. Brandon Holland. Would you like for me to repeat the question?
Yes, please. I'm sorry.
Okay. How will you collaborate with Republicans to make a better Kansas for everyone?
Well, I believe that there is always common ground to be found, between anyone. And that's one of the things I like most about just meeting new people every day. And one of the great things about, running a campaign is getting to talk to people every day, is that there's always something you can agree on. And I think that compromise really comes down to finding that one thing that we can agree on, and then reverse engineering from there. Our governmental system is not designed for quick, huge revolutionary change. It's designed for change to be incremental, taking into account that it's going to be based on compromise. We have to acknowledge that we are in a democracy, and in order for things to get done, a majority of people have to agree with something. In order for us to do that, we have to reach across the aisle, and I plan on doing that just like I deal with, the people that come into the liquor store I work at every single day. I treat them as human beings, and I ask them about how their day is, and often they'll tell me. I just like speaking to people, and I've been told that I'm pretty approachable. So what it comes down to for me is just acknowledging that politics is going to be messy and annoying. But if you are persistent and truly dedicated to what you want, you can persuade people. There is a very large portion of our legislature is moderate Republicans. And you see that a lot of the legislative changes that have occurred in our state over the past decade or so have always been a combination, or have always been a partnership between moderate Republicans and the Democrats. And I feel that we must continue that pattern.
Ms. Christina Haswood, would you like for me to repeat the question?
I think I got it. Thank you so
Okay.
much, Carol.
Sure.
I pride myself on being able to work with, Republicans and Democrats and everybody in between and outside. My political experience comes from going to Washington, D.C. and knocking on the doors of our Republican representatives and telling them about American Indian issues. I'm Native American, and with American Indian issues, we call with tribal sovereignty. We like to say it's either a bipartisan or no partisan issue. So either way, you come into these meetings. I've been in the halls of DC, in the Senate and the House, and I've come to these meetings, sat down with their staffers, and we know their values and their beliefs, but we can always find common ground. And I really pride myself on working across the aisle, compromise. So we come in with what we shoot for the stars, right? We compromise, and then we work, and then we build relationships, and then we build common ground, and we find, what do we really value? We all have a stance, a value of human values on certain situations, but then we also have to take a couple step backs and know that our decisions, such as not expanding Medicaid, is detrimental. It's cruel to not give health insurance, something that's basic, that should be a human right, basic health insurance, that we need to pass that. And I'm definitely ready to work with both parties, and no parties in between. I encourage everyone to, respect and come and approach somebody who has different values of you, to just come in with kindness, with respect. And that's how we can move forward together, and create better communities and quality of life, for our friends, families, and neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. And with that, we will proceed to our fourth question for the 2-minute round. Mr. Stevens? Okay, hold on. Why are you more qualified than the other 2 candidates?
Yes. First of all, let me say, I think we've got a great group of candidates here. And to be honest, we all have very similar views on most items. I think the difference is that I mean, I just turned 50 on July 1st, so and it was unique for me. So it's time for me to grow up. But I will say that, you know, that gives me 30 years of successes and failures and experiences and time for my wife to soften me and make me a kinder person. I'm a father. I think just my view on life is different at this point. It's funny because I would have never thought about running for this office. I thought I was completely unqualified until recently. I mean, it's a state level office, and I've put the time in, and I have the right experience for the right time. And to be honest, I have extensive budgeting experience, which can be unbelievably important at this time. I know how to create jobs. I understand our tax system, and I'm passionate about the same values the other 2 have. The difference is my experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens, and happy birthday. And Mr. Holland, the same question. Why are you more qualified than the other 2 candidates?
I would like to agree with AJ first off. I think we have a great group of candidates here, and I think 10th District should be very proud that we have, you know, this many awesome people, you know, running for office. I believe I'm the most qualified because in the legislature currently, I see a lot of doctors and, you know, lawyers and successful business owners. I don't see any real, you know, working people. I don't see any wage earners. I don't see people who rely on every single hour they can get at work in order to get by. I am a wage earner. I have been, and even during, you know, the intensely difficult years that I have in my past, I was still trying to, you know, work an hourly job, and it was truly difficult. I know firsthand what it's like to, you know, have your livelihood destroyed from a physical injury or mental health, because I had one that led to the other. Uh, I feel that I have the most personal experience dealing with a system that is not very understanding or accommodating in terms of covering mental health treatment. I know what it's like to have to work really hard with a doctor. I spent 5 years doing neurofeedback training with a neuropsychologist in order to, you know, get better and get my life back. I think that gives me the most passion about this. I think this gives me the most fight inside me for this, because as someone who, again, you know, got their life back, my mission is to make sure that everyone else can too. And on top of that, I have extensive experience with legislature. In college, I interned for Congressman Dennis Moore, and more recently, I interned for Senator David Haley. And so, going into the legislature, I would not be I would be a newcomer, but I would not be a neophyte. I have been in the legislature. I have seen how it works, and I'm ready to step in on day one.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. And with that, Ms. Haswood, why are you more qualified than the other 2 candidates?
With my public health degree, I do have a master's in public health and management, and it came at a time of COVID-19. I was asked to run by community leaders, and they saw that, you know, I was born and raised in the 10th district. I just got my master's in public health, and I'm ready to serve and represent my community. And I've always felt like I needed to give back. And, you know, reopening our state in a very cautious manner I value Kansans' lives, making sure that we're all healthy so we can rebuild our economy, so we can move forward and make things better. We saw our systems break and we need to refix them and repair them to make them better. I have experiences not only at the federal level, but at the state, down to the local, down to my big state university, even to the tribal level of health, and seeing how these systems work together, see where the communications and gaps are, where do we need to address. And I would bring, as one of the young candidates, I would bring a fresh perspective of ideas. My background of growing up with young parents, I grew up on social services programs such as WIC, Section 8 housing, as well as tribal clothing programs to have a roof over our head, food on a table, and clothes on our back. And I don't see our representatives coming from these backgrounds where very important decisions are being made about people like me. I want to bring that representation of people like me to the state capitol, as well as serve inspiration for women of color, young people of color to get politically involved, young people to get politically involved. If you feel like your voice wasn't heard, I hope I serve as an inspiration that our voices matter. We belong at this table. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holland. And with that, we will begin our next series of 1-minute questions. And we'll start with Mr. Stevens. Mr. Stevens, since the 1980s, Kansas has maintained a state water plan fund, which receives money from the general fund, lottery proceeds, and a wide assortment of fees charged to different classes of water users. Will you support fully funding the state water plan?
Yes, so water's our next great resource. I mean, it is right now, and you're seeing it. I mean, you look in Western Kansas right now where communities have actually sold their water rights. They're buying them back right now, and they leverage their future. It's awful what Nestle did in Sacramento, where they're actually getting all the water and bottling it, and there's none left for the people in California and Sacramento. They're able to, they're having to actually bring water in because they've sold all theirs to Nestle water. I would fully support funding water, and we need to find a way to protect our communities so that local governments can't solve short-term problems by selling away their future water rights. That happened in Baldwin City. We had water rights and we don't anymore. We sold them to Lawrence, and we'll never get those back. And it's something we've always regretted while I was on council. So water is an issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Mr. Holland, would you like for me to repeat the question?
No, I'm good. Thank you. I would also support fully funding water. I think, especially in our current state of climate change, water is going to be becoming more and more important to the people of Kansas. Farmers in Western Kansas have relied on the Oglala aquifer for years to, irrigate their crops. Water has to be taken care of in this state. It's hot here too, so we need to drink water as well. But I would agree with Mr. Stevens that it is crucial to fully fund the water in the state. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Haswood, would you like for me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. Since the 1980s, Kansas has maintained a state water plan fund, which receives money from the general fund, lottery proceeds, and a wide assortment of fees charged to different classes of water users. Will you support fully funding the state water plan?
Yeah, I support the state water plan. Water is life. And, we have to protect Mother Earth, and we have to protect her for future generations from climate change. And we also have to protect our water. I know some of us here more in the city, urban areas may not understand the severity of this issue when your water, the certainty of your water. Is it clean enough for me to drink? Is it clean enough for me to water my crops? Is it even clean enough to give back to my cattle? I'm Navajo, and we come from an agricultural people. I even remember going back to Arizona. My mom would take us out of school on a Friday to drive all the way back to Arizona to help with harvest. So I've grown up in these values of agriculture is actually, for people's living. And then we need to also promote that as well. I would require industrial level agricultural procedures to use and recycle surface water instead of groundwater, so it can extend the life of the aquifers as well. And we really have to protect such a sacred source of our natural resources. And I'm willing to protect and defend and be an advocate for our water. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens, now for the second question. What is your position on gun legislation?
Yes. But first thing priority for me is to close the private sale loophole on background checks. Currently in Kansas, you could be arrested for spousal abuse or domestic violence. You can get out and you can go and you can buy a gun privately from somebody and go use that gun. I don't know how anybody with any common sense on either side of the aisle can resist that. After that, I would want to get rid of assault rifles. Okay, there's no reason for them. Somewhere, I mean, if we continue down this path, we're going to have people saying they need tanks and they need missiles, and it's all silly. At the end of the day, we don't need high capacity magazines. And as far as the assault rifles, I've heard the excuse that we can't ban them because they're made legal. The names are changed. All we got to do is take the pistol grips off and turn them back into the shotgun style rifle so they can be used for hunting. But with the handles on them, they can be used in close quarter, and there's no reason for that. So in the end, I do support the right to bear arms. I support the Second Amendment. I do not support assault rifles, and I do not support selling without a background check.
Thank you. Mr. Holland, what is your position on gun legislation?
Well, I'd like to say that personally, I get it when it comes to guns. I live just down the road from the Cedar Hill Gun Club, and I like to go over there occasionally and shoot clay pigeons with a shotgun. I've gone to an indoor shooting range and tried firing pistols before. While I was in there, I saw assault style weapons just on the wall, and it scared me. I'd never actually been in the proximity of one before, and it terrified me. I was just thinking, how could these possibly be put in the hands of civilians? The inventor of the AR-15 designed it for military use during the Korean War. It was designed to kill as many people as possible in as short amount of time as possible. And it is reckless and dangerous and careless to have these weapons available to the public. I also support closing the private sale loophole. I think we need to seriously look at red flag laws, especially with the rising rate of mental health issues in this state. Guns are commonly used for suicide and mass attacks. Until we get our mental health shored up, we have to make sure that guns aren't getting into the hands of people who will use them poorly. Thanks.
Ms. Haswood, what is your position on gun legislation?
Unfortunately, I went to college in a time where school mass shootings became a reality. I remember going to undergrad and we actually had a school shooting threat, and the school responded in a very responsive, quick way. But it was a painful reminder that this could happen anywhere, anytime, any place, and you're still not ready for this reality to happen. As well as an undergrad, I had friends of friends who went to the Las Vegas Country Outdoor Show, and unfortunately, it ended up becoming the worst mass shooting in United States history. And having that personally come back to me, and this in fear of what are we going to do? Well, I want to support legislation of gun sensible laws, prevent gun sales to people with violent misdemeanors and felonies, and to require a 3-day waiting period to prevent the impulse buy of buying a gun for the wrong reason, as well as banning high capacity ammunition, magazines, and assault rifle weapon styles that are military grade that don't have the hunting or home protection purposes. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Stevens, why are you a Democrat?
So I'm a Democrat because I believe in privacy. I believe in people's rights to make their own choices. I'll be honest, I don't care what people do in their bedroom. I think that's their right. I believe in the freedom of religion or lack of. I believe that all people should be treated equal. I'm a lifelong member of the ACLU. I'm a Democrat because socially, I can't possibly imagine being restrictive on anybody's rights or trying to hold anybody down or discriminate against anybody. My actions as an elected official firmly entrenched that I am a progressive Democrat. I mean, I came to a rural community and passed a non-discrimination ordinance that one of my fellow council members called heavy-handed and called unnecessary, and that was a person that's a Democrat as well. We've got a lot of work to do, and I can't imagine being a member of any other party.
Thank you. Mr. Holland, why are you a Democrat?
I am a Democrat because life isn't fair, but it doesn't have to be unfair. And that's where government steps in. It is impossible in today's, in our society today for people to, get by or get through and, live the American dream all on their own. It's literally impossible nowadays. And I care about people. I want people to, be healthy and be well. And I want everyone to be treated the same, regardless of who you are, the color of your skin, your orientation, your gender identity. I mean, you are who you are. I couldn't care less about that. What I do care about is everybody having the equal chance to succeed in their lives, and get a better life or achieve a better life for them and their families and invest in their children's future. And that is why I'm a Democrat, because you definitely don't see that on the other side.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. Ms. Haswood, why are you a Democrat?
When I turned 18 and went to get my driver's license and I had to choose a party, I chose the party because I looked back in the history of the past legislation and see how that impacted my life. Democratic values have, put me, who comes from a low socioeconomic standard, I'm not even supposed to be here, being a Native American Indigenous person today, and how their policies helped improve my life. Democrats look at our differences and they look at the gaps and they say, okay, these people are disproportionately being affected and they're getting left behind. What can we do? What can we do? And, the stance of healthcare is a basic human right. As a public health professional, I believe that so. And how we celebrate our differences, being different in maybe your being LGBTQ plus or non-binary gender, having the right to choice for your reproductive rights, having the full autonomy and those other values as well. That's why I'm a Democrat.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stevens, how will you support students and educators of color during these challenging times within the public school systems?
Yes. So I was a college coach for 15 years and based my life on the emotions of 18 to 22-year-old college students. And I realized really quickly to find the root cause, like where did this start? And where I would start on this is I would push to repeal the food tax, because I think at the end of the day, students, and I'm one that went without meals. Students need to be able to be fed. They need to know that they're taken care of, and they need to feel stable in their life, so that they can go into school and learn without having other stress. So that's the first thing I would do. And I know it doesn't directly affect it, but I think it's a root cause. I mean, anytime you've got a socioeconomic deficiency, there's going to be an inadequacy as far as the nutrients and such. Beyond that, I would support additional social workers and any other initiative that comes forward that's going to improve student funding. Education is severely underfunded. Don't fool yourselves. Like what they did and what our current funding is absurdly low, and it needs to be increased in all ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Mr. Holland, how will you support students and educators of color during these challenging times within the public school systems?
I think there are a lot of different issues that need to be addressed in order to help the teachers and students in minorities, communities, and underprivileged schools. first off, we have to look at property taxes and see their part in school funding, because areas with lower property values are never going to be able to get as much money to their schools through their local funding. So the state has to step up to take care of that disparity. The state needs to look at which schools are struggling the most, and also focus on, you know, highest schools with the highest concentrations or highest numbers of minority students, and make sure that those are the ones we look at first. It also comes down to healthcare. Students can't learn. Students can't, you know, learn and advance themselves and expand their minds so they can go to college if they're sick, if they're hurting, you know, emotionally and physically. So we have to make sure that every single Kansan has health insurance, and along with so many small problems that need to be addressed in order to address the bigger issue. Thanks.
Ms. Haswood, how will you support students and educators of color during these challenging times within the public school systems?
As the only candidate in this primary that has been endorsed by KNEA, I will fight for the voices of the students and the teachers and other educators as well, who contribute to our children of education. I believe how do we support our teachers and students of colors? We should build more of a pipeline to make it easier for people of color to go to college, to go get a master's degree, have these special programs. I know at the state level, we have urban rural doctors at the medical center who have a more discounted price, who promise to go and work in these rural communities in Kansas. We need something like that for our teachers of colors. I know growing up, going to my schools, I really didn't have anyone who looked like me, a Native American teacher. You know, not only do we want more of diversity, but we want more of Hispanic teachers, of Islamic teachers, more Asian, Pacific Islander teachers. We need to bring more of that diversity so we can have more and support more students of color, as well as educate them on minority histories. As instead of just the regular United States histories, Native American, Indigenous histories, African American histories, and celebrate our diversities in that manner. Thank you.
Thank you. And that wraps up the questions for tonight's forum. And I would like to thank the delegates there, the candidates that came in for running for office. And again, you know, with this pandemic, I beg everyone to please take extra precautions and stay vigilant about your health when you're out there campaigning, because we need you out there.
And I would add my thanks as well. I think at this point, we've just got time for closing remarks and no additional questions. Is that right, Carol?
That's
okay.
Fine. Okay,
So
I thought we were short on time. We went over the 8 o'clock.
We are, but I think we can squeeze that in, but nothing else.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Mr. Stevens.
Closing remarks, 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. My closing remark is this. First of all, I think all three of us have a strong future in the leadership, and I see an immense amount of potential, and I'm super excited about working with both the other candidates throughout the future. Here's my point though, and this comes from my experience. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm the right person at the right time, and I have the right experience. This is not an entry-level job. This is an important time, and we have to get it right. We cannot fall back into the Brownback era of cutting taxes and stripping our services, which means we have to come in and find a way to overcome this $700 million deficit and still expand Medicaid, because it has to happen. Our citizens want it, and we have to find out-of-the-box ways to make this happen. All right, that's why I support legalizing marijuana. I support taxing it. You look at our neighboring states, they've shown that it works. You look at medical studies, there's no addictive quality as far as chemical in marijuana. It's less dangerous than cigarettes and alcohol as far as addiction. And we need to look outside the box, and we need to work together, because if we can't overcome these financial losses from COVID-19, we're not going to be able to move forward with any of the issues that all three of us candidates want. And at the end of the day, I learned from city council, and 4 years is a long time to be a one-issue candidate. What do you do when you achieve what you wanted? I've shown that I've got depth as far as what I'm looking to succeed in. I have a vested interest in the community. My family has long ties to Kansas. We came back here to raise our son to grow up in Kansas. And this is where we are. My wife's on school board. We're heavily invested in this community. And I have the right experience. I went to law school for regulatory compliance. I look at 100-page documents for fun. All right. I'm just telling you, I'm rare in that. I did that because I got it free because I was a college coach, and so I got free education. But I'm telling you, I'm a kid who can't grow up poor as can be, and have come up, and it's time for me to serve. And I'm experienced right now for this job. And I think all three of us have a future, but right now I'm the guy. Thank you.
Mr. Holland, you have 2 minutes for closing remarks. Thank you.
First off, I would like to say this was really fun. Thank you. I am running for every single person who has ever felt targeted or discriminated against or put upon or ignored or silenced by our state government. Times are tough right now for everybody, but especially the workers of Kansas. We've been struggling the most ever since Brownback, his tax policy is cutting the leg off the stool. Kansas workers have been struggling to get back, and we had finally made those gains. We'd finally got back to where we were before, and then COVID hit, and all that progress that was gained is lost. I think I'm the best candidate to be elected because when I go to the legislature, when I look at laws, I'm going to think, is this good for me? As a wage earner, I'm an essential worker running a liquor store. I've been interacting with 100 people a day, ever since this started. I have the firsthand experience of, people not worrying about my well-being, especially, customers coming into the store without masks on all the time. Just, they are endangering me. And thank God that we have the mask ordinance now, because I definitely feel safer. But that was made with the welfare of people who are most vulnerable. It was made with their welfare in mind, and I want to keep that going for everything. I believe in fairness. I believe in everybody being able to achieve the same heights. We don't start at the same spot. And some people will need more help than others, as there's a lot of institutional racism and other factors that have held back people of color and other minority groups for years. And I will do everything I can to break down those barriers so that all Kansans can be equal. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Haswood, you have 2 minutes for closing remarks. Thank you.
I want to thank Carol for moderating this forum and the audience for tuning in and engaging in this important primary, and my opponents for standing up and running to represent our community in the Kansas House. I think it's clear that any of us would make a really good representation in the 10th District. I'm proud to be considered for this position alongside them. From achieving environmental and racial justice to protecting our K-12 and higher education institutions to working through the economic and public health difficulties presented by the COVID-19 virus. There is so much work to be done here in Kansas. I believe I am the best candidate to work on these challenges on behalf of our district, while serving as a role model for young people and women of color who are wondering whether they too can get involved and have a say in their government. These are challenging and unprecedented times, and campaigning in these environments has been challenging and unprecedented as well. I wish I could be out there meeting the voters of the 10th District face to face, but until we get this virus under control, I will be reaching out to you through social media, by phone, and through mail as much as I can. If you like what I had to say tonight, please get involved with my campaign by submitting a form on my website, haswood4kansas.com. Consider donating while you're there. This primary election presents an incredible opportunity to elect a fresh, bold new generation of representatives for Lawrence, Baldwin City, and the Southeast Douglas County, and I want to be your voice in the state capitol when the legislature reconvenes in January. And if we put in the work, Democrats will have the numbers to accomplish the goals we've discussed tonight. I ask for your vote in the August 4th primary, and I thank you for considering me to be the next representative of your 10th district. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to thank the Douglas County Democrats and the candidates and the attendees, and to all the wonderful people who submitted some really tough questions. It was fun for us to sort through the questions. So thank you to those of you who submitted the questions, because we do take the time to sort through the questions. Thank you. And stay safe. Be vigilant about your health.
Good night, all.
Good night.